and welcome to an Eternium video. What I'm going to do in this video is take a look, or give my thoughts rather, on the upcoming balance changes for Mage only. There are changes for Bounty Hunter and Warrior as well, but since I don't play those classes I can't really give much of an opinion on whether they're any good or not, those changes, so I'm going to skip those altogether. I'll put a link in the description down to the patch notes on the Eternium forums. If you wish to go and read them in full, they'll be there. So first change is for block rating, a global one. I'm probably going to skip over this purely because although there are a few suboptimal mage builds where you might want to use a shield, they're not triggering any particularly useful processes for mage, so not too interested in them. The only thing I'll say on that is that any new items that you craft with block rating will have a higher block rating going forward once the patch is live. But let's jump in instead first of all with the Brooch of Vampirism. Okay, so the Brooch of Vampirism as it currently is, you have a chance to tether yourself to a target for 6 seconds, that grants 5,000 life regen and 10,000% weapon damage going out every second. That lasts for 6 seconds, and the further away from your target you are, the less effective that is. The change is increasing the life regen aspect from 5,000 to 15,000. So that makes this brooch a very viable alternative to Vial of the Wind Spirit once you hit very high level trials where the vial isn't giving you as much benefit. You'll have enough haste already in your build once you're at that stage that the haste from Vial of Wind Spirit isn't adding much. The damage from its AoE isn't doing a great deal. So if you can tether yourself to a boss and do 10,000% weapon damage for 6 seconds, that would be very nice. So low and mid region trials, Vial of Wind Spirit, high level trials, Brooch of Vampirism is a definite possibility that I will be testing out once this is live. Next up we have Brooch of the Stormcaller, currently dealing 10,000% weapon damage with an 80% chance to jump to another target for 80% of that. Can jump up to 5 times, similar to how Arc Lightning works. That's happening roughly every 10 seconds. And the change to that is that this damage amount will be 25,000% weapon damage. I'd need to play around with that one on Stormcaller to see if it's any good compared to trinkets that are currently in use. Where I do see that being pretty potent though is in the arena, depending on what sort of damage they're going to scale in there. Passively hitting your enemy for 25,000% weapon damage. It could be a case of run around, stay alive, keep attacking, so every 10 seconds you can suddenly whack them really hard. Be an interesting one to look at, so keep an eye on that one. I shall be doing some testing once that is live. As far as the skills and attacks that Mage have available to them, we have one being buffed, which is Fireball. In particular, the affected enemies currently burn for 30% weapon damage, and this is increasing to 150%. That has caught my eye as something that sounds very interesting. That's pretty much how you would have an experience farming Death from Above build looking. but it would be quite nice if we could do that and instead take Fireball instead of Arc Lightning. Now it's a hard choice at the moment because Arc Lightning is giving us 26.4% more damage and 25% attack speed increase with full stacks, but with this extra burning that's going to be going on, it's something that might allow Death from Above builds to go a bit higher than they currently do. And the reason for that is that at level 10 we also have this Fireball Meteor that drops, so I should mention from here. 25% to summon a meteor, and what that does is it builds up these stacks here of combustion, and those are exactly the same as what we get from our Death from Above, and we can keep those fireballs resetting this timer, so then we can just wait for a talisman or slayer to proc before we actually send out our thermal shock on a boss, so it could increase boss damage for the build as we do it there, because that's cropped up. So that has certainly caught my interest. Our thermal shock there has out damaged everything below it in one go through stacking all those combustions and Death from Above attacks. Certainly if you are not currently using Death from Above or Fireball when levelling mages in AMB, that's going to be even stronger going forward. It's really strong for low level trolls, and I tend to drop it as soon as Arc Lightning hits level 7. I am very interested in running some tests doing pure Fireball all the way, so that one has caught my attention. Once it's live I'll do some testing and we'll take a look at some builds with it and see how it performs. So that one's looking interesting and potentially good from my perspective, so I shall let you know how that goes. Okay, let's move on to some of the changes to the gear that's coming out. The Arcane Belt of Shielding, the deflect rating is going to get doubled, and my response to that is, so what? Deflect rating is utterly useless. I think I've said it plenty of times before. Enemies are low damage, low attack speed, very, very high toughness. So a small hit coming into you gets reduced even more and sent back to something that could have hundreds of millions or even billions of health. It's barely a tickle. And a lot of the changes to the other pieces that we're about to look at, I looked at and thought, well, what's the point of that? They all look a bit useless in the real world for trials. And after some thought, I'm thinking that these changes for armour pieces are not aimed at trials and changing the leaderboard, certainly for Mage. It might be different for other classes, but for Mage, nothing that we're going to go through today is going to impact the leaderboard in any way whatsoever. So if you're working towards an ELR set still, keep going. That's going to be king still. But I think possibly this is something that they're looking at the future of the arena. And suddenly high deflect rating against a PvP character, which will be high attack speed, low toughness in comparison to a mob in a trial, then potentially that might have some impact there. But in terms of if you're running trials, this belt is currently useless, and increasing that deflect rating leaves it as useless. So let's move on from this one. Okay, next up we have the Arcanist set, the 6-piece bonus in particular, is being changed. So this currently, blink, time warp, paradox or singularity generates a shard of frozen time. At present you need 10 shards, and then that will give you a 90% damage reduction, 300% bonus damage, and immune to crowd control effects for 9 seconds, and finish all your cooldowns. This is getting buffed and nerfed at the same time, even though this is a buffs only patch apparently. So the devs don't quite understand what buffs and only means. Instead of 10 shards, you'll need 7. So you'll be able to generate this effect more frequently, but the damage reduction granted is being cut from 90% down to 70%. I think that's going to leave you far too squishy to make any use of it. Waits to be seen. And it doesn't address the fundamental problems with the set that make it currently a very distant third best set to use, and I shall go over the reasons for that after we've taken a look at the changes to the weapons. So Eridanus has this: when the cooldown of any ability is restored, it will emit a ripple dealing 4000% weapon damage to all targets in a radius. That 4000 is going to be buffed up to 10,000. Now that, on the face of it, sounds very nice, but the problem is the radius is tiny. You have to be right on top of the mobs for that to hit them. It's far too small an area of effect to stand back whilst that is happening. You'll need to blink right into the mob pack for that to hit them, and as we've just seen with the armor set, the damage reduction is being reduced from 90% to 70%, and that is going to leave you far too squishy to be making much use of this. The problem with survivability for Arcanist is compounded by the fact that they are not addressing the problems with singularity, where they've changed that. That used to be pumping out loads and loads of life on hit, and that really needs to be reinstated for Arcanist to stand any sort of chance. So a full level 77 celestialized Arcanist gear set in the hands of a master, and those that were masters at this have all left the game, unsurprisingly. I think it's still going to struggle to get beyond 140, 141 once this changes in. Very big missed opportunity for trials if they could buff singularity to pump out life on hit as it used to. I think it's perfectly fine for them to leave the nerfs to alacrity if that's what they want, although that harms warrior in a big way as well. If they're determined that alacrity is to be as it is, then I think singularity to make Arcanist work needs a life on hit to be restored to how it used to be, and really for this weapon I think this damage radius needs to be vastly increased, probably to the size of what we see with Vial of the Wind Spirit that would be used by an ELR mage, which hits things halfway across the screen, whereas this you have to be pretty much standing on top, almost in melee range, which isn't helpful when you're playing a light armor class and then nerfing the amount of damage reduction that you get. So ouch, it's a nerf buff that doesn't really work. I mentioned with the one of the earlier items as well. I think this is probably aimed at the arena, so we shall wait and see. It's certainly not going to do anything whatsoever in terms of trials or AMB and being able to push and post anything decent there. So let's move on. Next up we have Stormcaller and the 6-piece bonus. Currently singularity hitting a target's lightning struck has a 15% chance of spawning an event horizon. Each event horizon deals damage equal to 200% of singularity damage, and the devs are adding in that enemies hit by this event horizon will also do 50% less damage to you. And all I can say to that is, what on earth are they thinking? Kinu has kindly provided me in previous videos with builds and a lot of information around Stormcaller, so a lot of the information I'm about to give you comes from Kinu. All credit to him. As I've mentioned in previous videos where I've featured Stormcaller, when we get these event horizons on large groups of enemies, we currently suffer from catastrophic lag, and adding an additional thing for the calculations to track into all the chaos that's going on during that process is utter madness from the devs. One enemy that's lightning struck and hit by singularity can spawn up to 4 event horizons. Each event horizon is hitting the enemies around it at 3.8 times your hits per second, and typically in high level trials you're going to be pulling large groups, 100 plus mobs, into one very tight group, hitting them and getting an awful lot of event horizons in there. They're not going to do enough damage to kill them, so you're going to have to do this multiple times. If we say we've got 100 mobs and let's say 20 event horizons, and let's say they're hitting 24 times a second and they're hitting all 100 mobs, all you need to do is 24 times 100. Keep track of each hit that they're doing. Is it a critical hit or is it a regular hit? What buffs and debuffs are on you as a character? Each of the individual enemies that are being hit, what buffs and debuffs are on them? You've probably still got singularity drifting through that big group, so that needs still tracking as well with all the damage that's putting out. Blizzard is probably on them as well, so that's still doing damage and other calculations going on. So this change is a buff to your damage reduction, and you're probably going to need it because your FPS is going to be at best single figures, I should imagine, on high level trials. Putting it in the 6-piece bonus I think is incredibly stupid. If they wanted damage reduction, I think possibly a better place for it is in a 2-piece bonus. When a target becomes lightning struck, then they'd start doing 50% less damage. Then at least you're not trying to track all that at the point when the chaos from event horizons starts happening, and there's far too much going on for pretty much most PCs and mobile devices to handle, and you'll just see the game grind to a halt. So missed opportunity. I think Stormcaller still needs a major redesign. It is the second best set. It might be able to push a few trials higher if they could redesign it and fix the problems that they've created. Then this could be a really good set. I do hope they someday redesign it but keep the same sort of gameplay style, because I really do like how this plays, and I would really like to change to using that rather than Frostbeam on ELR, because I find that quite boring at times, whereas Stormcaller keeps you on your toes and guessing if you're still alive once you've got your event horizons going. So that's that. We'll move on to the last set now. And finally, the Apprentice set is getting buffs across the board on all three of its bonuses. So to start out, the two-piece bonus, 210 crit rating is added in currently. That is going up to, checking notes, I think it's 840 crit rating. If you have a full set of legendary Apprentice gear, I don't recommend you craft it. 840, assuming you got crit rating on everything, is probably going to give you 1 or 2%, so it's not a great deal there. But I think that is a significant buff for players that are new level 70, perhaps coming out of early game and moving into sort of mid game when you're starting to build your sets. So I'm thinking people that are on epic gear because they don't have materials to craft legendary, and they don't have all the recipes to craft a full set of gear. So in some of my other videos, particularly in the Zero to Hero series, in AMB in particular, I did a mix and match using the two-piece bonus to get some crit rating into an epic set of experience farming gear. So 210 crit rating currently is going to change to 840. I think that's a significant buff for those entering mid-game, but not a great deal of excitement for later in the game, certainly on its own. The four-piece bonus, currently a 25% chance to gain a protective shield. That's going to increase to 50%, and yeah, whatever. Apprentice runs high attack speed. You're looking at 6, 7, 8 hits per second. 25% chance if you're hitting 8 times a second. That's pretty much guaranteed that you should see a shield coming up every second anyway. Changing that to 50% doesn't really change what you'll be experiencing, so I'm not too sure that that's going to make much of a difference. And finally, the 6-piece bonus, a 10% chance to cast Immolate on a target when attacking. That will still be that, but the Immolate currently casts as a level 10 skill, and it is getting changed to cast at level 50. Now the devs are kind enough to not bother telling us what a level 50 Immolate looks like. At level 10 it does 120% weapon damage. I have looked at how it increases from level 1 to level 10. It's going up 5% each level, so I've sort of extrapolated that means by level 50 it will be 320% weapon damage. Sounds good, probably isn't. I will drop a clip in shortly just showing a demonstration of Immolate as it currently is, and then with a Immolate bracer that does something like 460% extra Immolate damage, just to show that it's an utterly insignificant amount. So I'm not too convinced that that's a major buff. Targets 45% more damage. We don't know what level 50 is. This buff originally comes in at level 3 at 30%, and by level 10 it is 45%. I don't have any data in between to see how that increases, or whether it was too big, just one big step at level 10. So for now I'm going to assume it doesn't do any extra damage at level 50. It's still 45%, but future testing when this is live will confirm whether that's the case or not. And finally, effective enemies burn, currently 50% weapon damage. That comes in at level 7 at level 50%, and stays at 50% all the way up to level 10. So my assumption for now is a level 50 Emulate will still only be doing 50% weapon damage as a burn. So I don't think that means that suddenly you can pair Grand Magister's command weapons with this set and start looking at triggering massive thermal shocks from level 50 Immolates. I just don't think the damage is there, or the burn is there for it. What I'll do is just drop in that clip that I mentioned, and then we'll just wrap up. Okay, so this quick experiment's just to show why I don't think the Immolate buff is going to be particularly impressive. Well, I've got a character here, stripped naked except for Grand Magister's command weapon set, because I want to get a Frost Nova off, and Fire Lily equipped so that I can smooth damage and we don't have crit hits impacting our results. So character has level 10 Immolate, 120% weapon damage, affected targets 45% more damage, and enemies burn for 50% weapon damage. What I'm going to do is Immolate and then Frost Nova as soon as possible afterwards. We'll just wait for Immolate to run its course, see how much total damage that did. So 1.26 million and a thermal shock of 2.3 million. Now I shall reset that. In my inventory I have an Immolate damage increased by 462%, so this is much bigger than the upcoming buff for Apprentice. We'll do exactly the same. I expect a larger thermal shock because we've got frost damage on this. I'm not going to sit and craft a million bracers just to try and get the right one. So again, Immolate, Frost Nova, wait for Immolate to run its process, which it's done. So Immolate goes up to 7.28 million. Thermal shocks a little bit bigger as we expect because of the extra frost damage. That is a lot more than we would have had previously, but it's still an utterly insignificant amount. There's a final demonstration. Let's reset that. Let's just do a single death from above. 50 million from that one skill there. So the buff to Immolate, I don't think it's going to be causing great waves in the world. We have to see what rank 50 really looks like, if there's an increase to the burning damage and an increase to the overall damage taken, but in my mind I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's just a overall weapon damage increase, so we shall see. So I think that's about it for Mage. As I said right at the top, Elemental Lord Regalia, currently the best build, and once these go in will still be the best build. So for those looking for variations on builds or variations on sets on the leaderboard, something that I'm very keen to see. Another disappointing round of balance. I think this is honestly aimed at the arena and something going on there in the future. It's definitely not changing any of the current meta for Mage, and no indication that they've going to be changing that anytime soon afterwards either. There are other changes going in for the general world, which are in the patch notes, which are linked in the description below. I believe Act 2 is getting a new look, and they've managed to break a few things in there. I think some new or additional assets have been dropped into Act 1. We shall see when this goes live. So depending on how bad the buggy mess is through testing and how well people do in identifying bugs and how much the devs actually care about fixing some of these bugs, even though there's some pretty serious ones still out there in the live version, we wait to see. So this is going to be live, I should imagine, sometime in September. Once that's stable, then it will be on with the next AMB event, and potentially, since I've set out quite a few of those, depending on how Death from Above build is looking, potentially I might do a full Death from Above all the way through run. So there will be news on that in the future, and also once I've had a chance to look at all the different builds and test them out properly, there will be a mini series on Mage builds coming as well. In the meantime, it will probably be pretty quiet around here. There might be a music video uploaded in the next week or so. Any questions or comments, feel free to ask down below, and as always, thank you very much for watching.